reaction to heightened tensions between the United States and Iran and what it means for the markets, let's welcome DJ Peterson. He is founder of Longview Global Advisors. He advises corporations on global risk, so it's a good day to have you here, DJ. Also, for market reaction to this, Jim Urio of TJM Institutional Services. He's also a CNBC contributor. And Jim, let's just start with the market's reaction. Are you surprised to see that the S&P and the NASDAQ are actually indicated higher right now, and that the Dow has come back from that down 400 points that we saw overnight?
I've spent the last, 12 hours being surprised about a ton of things. I mean, we talk about strange news nights, and then we have last night. I think the 60-point bounce off the lows in the S&Ps is an aggressive rejection of the lows. From a technical standpoint, that's a pretty strong signal. But the fundamental story itself, I mean, we have to remember that Donald Trump has to thread a needle today when he gives his statement, because the market is absolutely interpreting this as, Iran doesn't want to escalate. They felt they had to do something to save face. They did it. And, they've used their coupon, and now hopefully all is well. Now, and it's funny that you mention it that way, because that tweet last night could be taken as all is well at our bases or all is well in this situation. And we're going to hear from Donald Trump today and find out more about that. I personally think it's probably going to be put aside now. The market's reaction to me makes me think that it will take out yesterday's highs, which are up at about 32.53, and I think the market's going to do okay.
Although, as Eamon just said, things could change very quickly. If it looked like things were escalating again, what do you think would happen with the stocks?
No doubt about it. I think if he gives his statement today and there's an indication in that we plan on escalating this, I think the markets could suffer, too. Not because I think that war is necessarily terrible for markets. I think that we've had a 30% rally in the last year. There are still people who are assessing risk. It's the first trading week of the year. People are worried about having too many stocks. I think if he starts to speak that way and saber rattle, I think the markets could suffer. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he has a perfect out. We slap them, they slap us. Everybody gets to save face.
DJ, you spend your career actually advising companies on what to think about global risk. I bet you've been pretty busy lately.
It's been quite a day and quite a week, yes, to start the year.
So what do you tell companies right now?
I think there's two parts. One is the near term and then the longer term. And the near term question is retaliation. The longer term is escalation. And what we're seeing right now, at least in the last day, of course, is that if you think about the retaliation, what the Iranians said is they started their retaliation with the attack on Al-Anbar, the first base, and they concluded it with their attack on Erbil, the second base. So perhaps that's it. That is retaliation. So the next question then is there escalation? Mm-hmm. And then escalation has the longer term play. And that
escalation between the two players or escalation with some of the proxy?
That's a great question, and that's exactly it. Escalation between the two players, a U.S. counterattack on Iranian assets in Iran. An escalation involving third parties might be an attack on Israel, or Israel taking a move against Iran, or attack against oil fields again in Saudi Arabia or the UAE. So it's escalating or expanding the field of play.
What do you tell companies that have business in the Middle East at this point?
Right. I think there's, again, two questions. One is what are the attacks or what are the potential reprisals that hit specific facilities or operations, brick and mortar?
Do you tell them to bring their employees back? Do you tell them to change their operations?
Not at this point. Of course, facilities and operations in Iraq are the most exposed. It's very clear that Iran wants the United States and American allied forces and American interests out of Iran. And so that is obviously the first.
Out of Iraq.
I'm sorry, out of Iraq. Thank you, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think they've said the entire region at this point.
We're not in Iran,
right?
I think, unless it's special forces.
Right. So I think if it's looking at individual facilities and obviously trying to guess what facilities or people are at risk. And then there's the larger systemic risks for companies. What does a disruption in oil supplies mean? What do cyber attacks mean from a systemic perspective, if that's really a risk? But clearly, it's specific. The risks to companies are to specific facilities and people and operations.
Are you a believer in the conventional, what appears to be conventional wisdom in the last 6 hours, that this whole situation may have de-escalated and that Iran will really genuinely end what they're doing and that we will genuinely end what we're doing?
I don't think we'll end what we're doing. I think it's very clear that there's a longer-term play that Iran wants.
What does that play look like?
It looks like continued skirmishes in the region and perhaps around the world, attacks on terrorist-type attacks on U.S. interests, such as embassies around the world or people, facilities in the region for sure. That is going to continue. Cyber will continue. Right. That is not going to go away, and perhaps will actually escalate. I think also a very important issue to watch right now is the destabilization of Iraq.
Right. And what happens if do you think we're going to end up having to leave Iraq?
Obviously, some interests. There's many parties. The Iranian-oriented political interests in Iraq want the U.S. out. The Sunnis and the Kurds do not. And I think at this point, for the U.S. to pull out would be seen, certainly globally, as a kind of, pulling out in response to this retaliation or this skirmish. So I think the U.S. would actually want to show that it's there staying in force in the near term.
Hey, Jim, very quickly, I know it seems minor in comparison, but we do have an ADP report that's out this morning. Will the market pay much attention to that, or is it just focused on this right now?
I think it's going to pay a little bit of attention to it. The market doesn't want to believe that things are boiling over and the Fed has to tighten in response to that. But things like this, what's happening in the Middle East, things that happen in China, I think ultimately there's this weird good part of it for the Fed, because the Fed can look at these numbers as they're heating up a little bit and say to themselves, yeah, but there's too many unknowns out there for us to start talking very hawkishly. So I don't think it matters as much as it does, obviously, because of the cloud of other stories.